The following is a video presentation based on the book Aviation Century: Wings of Change. While no references will be made to the book during the presentation in an effort to produce a more professional documentary, all information, facts, and quotes used are from the book. All footage and images are the copyright of their respective owners. The aviation industry has affected our lives for more than a century now. However, most people don't know how the industry has progressed and how it has got to where it is today. While modern day aviators do learn the history of aviation, the common passenger aboard a commercial flight doesn't even know much about the airplane when it's traveling on. For those and more reasons, this special presentation will give you a brief look at how the aviation industry has evolved over the last century and how it continues to affect our lives every day. In the beginning, all aviation was private. The nature of the enterprise at its birth and during its early stage determined that it would be so. No machines could have fitted the description of private home-built aircraft more closely than the Wright biplanes, designed as they were by brothers who were necessarily amateur aircraft builders and assembled out of items for the most part available at local hardware stores. Except insofar as they were the source of the basic materials, neither big business nor established industry had any part to play in making powered human flight a reality. Even after 1908, when the world at last began to recognize that flying might be a practical activity, the small factories established by the pioneers manufactured aircraft only for those few brave souls who had sufficient money and nerve to gratify their individual appetites for adventure. In the post-World War I world, the aviation scene was dramatically changed. Aircraft had demonstrated their capabilities and revealed something of their potential between 1914 and 1918. More to the point, there were vast numbers of surplus machines available and plenty of young pilots to fly them. Private ownership of aircraft grew quickly, giving rise to activities such as barnstorming and air taxi services as the new owners sought to keep flying and earn a living at the same time. The booming U.S. economy of the mid-1920s and the increasing availability of reliable, lightweight engines such as the Wright Whirlwind Radial did much to produce an increase in sales of personal aircraft by 1926. But the event that did more than any other to galvanize public interest in America in flying was Lindbergh's Atlantic crossing in 1927. From that point on, private aviation grew and got more popular, with other countries around the world becoming a part of this new phenomena of flying. Manned unpowered flight also became more recognized and powerless aircraft were given more importance than ever before. As the industry progressed and time went by, women and African Americans entered the world of aviation by the late 20th century. Although real progress in the aerodynamics of heavier-than-air flight was not achieved until the 19th century, human beings had by then become accustomed to the fact that they could defy gravity and float above the earth. In 1783, the first of aviation's many pairs of cooperating brothers, Etienne and Joseph Montgolfier, successfully demonstrated hot air balloons, or aerostatic machines, in France. Prudently, the Montgolfiers chose not to test their aerostats themselves. The first aeronauts were a sheep, a rooster, and a duck. These creatures having survived an 8-minute flight, the first men to travel by air were Pilatre de Rosière and the Marquis d'Arlande, who stoked a fire of straw to keep their Montgolfier afloat as they flew across Paris in the course of a 25-minute flight on November 21, 1783. With dirigibility, the capacity to be directed lacking in a balloon, a power source was soon added to the balloons so they could be steered and directed as preferred by their pilots. Germans took a big role in the development of their airships, powered lighter-than-air aircraft that could be steered and propelled through the air. Other early competitors in the airship industry were the US, Great Britain, France, and Italy. Giant airships were mostly used for military purposes, while smaller airships were used more for commercial flight and later on for advertising. Accidents such as the Hindenburg disaster forced manufacturers to improve the designs and make the contents inside the balloon safer. However, the capabilities of airships were surpassed by those of airplanes, and their use decreased over time. During their golden age, the most successful airships of all time were the German-made Zeppelins. With the end of their military and commercial use, the airships were revived in the late 20th century in smaller sizes, which became known just as blimps, but this time their use was mostly advertising. You might have seen some Goodyear blimps in the air around sporting events these days, because that's their main use these days, advertising. Another type of balloon in use today is the classic hot air balloon you might have seen on TV. Overall, balloons have greatly affected the aviation industry and continue to do so today, as they give a look of the earth around us at high altitudes or just display advertises for companies looking to get their product noticed. Although the seeds of maple trees provide readily observed evolutionary evidence of flight accomplished by rotating aerofoils, and the helicopter has become a commonplace of daily life, most people still find something disturbingly unnatural about rotary wing flight. The human mind can accept the logic of fixed wings, a concept reassuringly confirmed by soaring flights of many birds. Aircraft with rotating wings, on the other hand, can give the expression of having no visible means of support. Developed during the 20th century, despite intimidating difficulties, they have become creatures of unnerving complexity, surmounted by noisy, whirling masses of machinery that seem hell-bent on flying apart in an orgy of centrifugal disintegration. Igor Sikorsky, often referred to as the father of the helicopter, failed to make one in Russia on his first attempt. So he took interest in other aspects of aviation and built a few airplanes instead. Later in his life, he immigrated to the US, where he got funding from several of the former Russian military officers. With the right resources, he was able to produce the Watt Sikorsky VS-300 on 14 September 1939. Sikorsky's success with the VS-300 led to the R-4, which became the world's first mass-produced helicopter in 1942. Sikorsky's final VS-300 rotor configuration, comprising a single main motor and a single anti-torque tail rotor, has proven to be one of the most popular helicopter configurations, being used in single most helicopters produced today. With all the success he had among other designers around the world, the rotary wing aircraft industry took off as more innovative ideas and better helicopters produced every year. Today, helicopters are used for a variety of purposes such as medical assistance, rescue missions, military assistance, commercial flights, civil operations, and for just the fun of it. There are small helicopters such as the Boeing AH-64D Apache used for military operations to the big helicopters such as the Mi-26, better known as just Halo, which is used for carrying up to 100 troops. Helicopters have simply been an amazing way of flying and continue to be so today. Research and development endeavor has been at the core of aeronautical progress from the beginning. Before a new aircraft takes wing, designers and constructors may spend years on the painstaking work of conceiving, drawing, building, shaping, and modifying the machine to ensure that it will function as efficiently as possible. Flight testing, a frequently hazardous and invariably challenging activity for the pilots involved, has always been an essential part of the process. As the 20th century advanced and the fund of knowledge about aerodynamics and aircraft structures grew, the role of the test pilot began to change. In the early days, pilots knew that in testing a new aircraft, they would be exploring the unknown, largely depending on trial and error to establish the machine's characteristics and achieve improvement. With experience and the evolution of sensible testing techniques, the element of pure exploration diminished, and the test pilots became more of an analyst, a technician trained to evaluate every aspect of an aircraft's performance with care and precision. Work done with the wind tunnels and later with simulators and computers steadily reduced the nervous uncertainty with which a first flight was approached. Even so, the day still comes when a test pilot must go to full power and commit the machine to its natural element for the first time. And it always is a moment of truth, when pulses quicken and mouths go dry. The calculations have been made. The designer seems satisfied. The preliminaries are over. The aircraft trembles with life, but will it fly? The pioneers of powered flight designed and built their machines and then learned how to fly them, in the process testing their aircraft and revealing some of flight's mysteries. The Wright brothers, with their meticulously scientific yet practical methods, were the first successful test pilots of powered aircraft, setting a standard for flight testing that few other pioneers could match. Wilbur was explicit about the need to gain airborne experience, saying, "If you really wish to learn, you must mount a machine and become acquainted with its tricks by actual trial," meaning that if you really want to learn about the safety of your aircraft, you have to get in it and test it out for yourself. Test pilots continue to play an essential role in the aviation industry as they test and analyze the newest airplanes that go into service. For most of the world's leading aeronautical nations, World War II ended or severely restricted civil air operations and brought the development of transport aircraft to a halt. In Europe, Lufthansa flew routes within the German-occupied territories and established a few links with neutral countries, using mostly aging but reliable Junkers 52 or 53M. For the United Kingdom, the principal tasks of the British Overseas Airways Corporation, the successor to Imperial Airways, were to maintain communications between the countries of the Commonwealth and to operate a North Atlantic service. After some committees met up to discuss the post-war aviation industry, it was agreed that Britain could benefit from having led the world in turbojet development by becoming the first nation to produce airliners powered by jet or turboprop engines. The situation was different for the US, having established a lead in airliner design before World War II. American aircraft manufacturers entered the post-war world well placed to consolidate their dominance. As the civil aircraft industry grew, competition became greater as companies such as Douglas and Boeing competed in the US, while other companies around the world competed to make better aircraft. The demand for better aircraft grew very fast as traveling in the air became cheaper and the amount of passengers flying each year grew rapidly. As time passed, turboprop engines declined and the jet engine began its rise to the top where it rests even today. Many turboprop airplanes gained dominance during the mid-20th century, such as the DC-7s and the Boeing 377 Stratocruisers. The Soviet Union had its share of the aircraft industry as it built its own aircraft like Ilyushin IL-14, but as the jet age dawned, the turboprops lost their significance, with the jet engines being a whole lot more powerful and durable than the noisy and less powerful turboprops of the mid-1900s. Boeing 707 was the airliner that led the way in exploiting jet power for commercial aviation and established Boeing's long-lived dominance as a manufacturer of civil airliners. While the airliners were doing great business, the engine manufacturing companies such as Rolls-Royce and Pratt & Whitney were advancing their technology for more and more powerful and reliable engines that can be fitted on the new breed of airliners. Another innovative design entered the aviation industry in the 60s. It was the three-engine aircraft. Several successful designs included the Boeing 727, the HS-121 Trident, and the Tu-154, a Soviet airliner produced and used widely in the Soviet Union. Another revolution came in the aircraft industry when jet engines were taken to the next level, and the result was the Concorde, a supersonic airliner, an elegant delta with a wing leading edge shaped in a gentle S-curve. Plans to have the aircraft in service by 1968 had seriously underestimated the difficulties, and it was not until March 1969 that the first prototype left the ground at Toulouse. The second flew from Filton near Bristol a month later. To the surprise of many Western observers, however, another supersonic airliner had beaten them into the air. Andrei Tupolev was the Soviet designer who made sure that the West did not claim supersonic airliner travel for themselves alone. Because of the similar challenges he faced as his British and French counterparts, he arrived at similar solutions, which was the reason why the Tu-144 bore superficial resemblance to the Concorde, earning it the nickname of Concorde C in the Western press. Despite the similar look, it had many differences, such as the one that it was slightly larger than the Concorde. Both aircraft had drooped snoot noses that could be lowered to improve visibility on landing. Despite the aeronautical phenomena the Concorde was, it was too costly to operate and to travel, and after a horrid incident killing all aboard on July 25, 2000, the demise of the aircraft came in October 2003. While the Concorde was becoming the aviation phenomena it was, a new aircraft was introduced by Boeing, the Boeing 747. It became the symbol for the airline industry upon its introduction to the traveling public in 1968. Almost 40 years later, the venerable original jumbo jet still soldiers on in the overnight package delivery role and carrying millions of passengers every year to their destination. The capacity for 300 plus passengers translates into huge numbers, which make air cargo flights very practical. The first 747 freighter could easily carry 100 tons across the Atlantic Ocean or across the US. Upon its introduction, many astonished spectators doubted whether it would ever get off the ground. The Boeing 747 production line at Everett, Washington State is acknowledged in the Guinness Book of World Records to be the largest building in the world by volume. The 747 is possibly the most complex single machine ever constructed. Each 747 is made up of some 6 million parts. The Boeing 747 still dominates the aircraft industry as it is operated by hundreds of airlines all over the world. Although not the most important in the history of aviation, executive jets became a big part of the aviation world as more businessmen and executives started to travel on their convenience rather than having to work around the busy airline schedules. Throughout the years, bigger and better aircrafts have been developed to accompany executives to their destination. The biggest and most luxurious executive jets are the Boeing 737 business jet and the Airbus A319 corporate jet, which hold the promise of being the ultimate executive status symbols. The world of aviation is rich with a history of innovation. Whether it's an airship, a personal aircraft, a hot air balloon, a military jet, or a commercial jet, they all have a big history which shows us the monumental progress that has been made in just a little over 100 years since the first powered flight by the Wright brothers. The aviation industry has affected all of our lives one way or another, and it's a great experience to know how it all began to how it got to where it is today. This video presentation was a brief look at the history of aviation. For a more detailed look at the history of aviation, Aviation Century Wings of Change, and all the other books in the Aviation Century book series are highly recommended for reading. All footage and images are the copyright of their respectful owners.